I do remember crossing the finish line, and I do remember Rob waiting there as he was waiting for the other grads as well and wrapping me up with the Australian flag. And just that sense of achievement was just incredible.
Welcome along to another episode of Execs Who Run, where we explore life, leadership and the miles in between. I'm your host, Jason Hunt, and today's guest really has mastered all three of those. At 15, Ayesha Razzaq was left in Australia by her diplomat parents to pursue a better education, an experience that truly shaped her. That mindset has carried her through a career leading transformations at one of Australia's largest energy retailers and across the finish line in all 6 world major marathons. She's also a proud supporter of the Indigenous Marathon Foundation, having raised thousands of dollars in the process. Today we'll talk about how being left alone here in Australia at 15 shaped her mindset, the parallels she finds between running and leading major change, and how she balances a high-pressure career with marathon training. Before we jump into the episode though, I really want to hear from you and really want your feedback. Whether it's things you like, things you don't like, people who you think I should try have on the show, I really want to know. So please reach out in any way you can. All the links will be in the show description to be able to get in touch. But I really would like your opinion. Right, without further ado, let's jump into the show. So, Ayesha, very, very exciting to have you here and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. When I heard about your podcast, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly in my sweet spot. I love leadership, I love running, and I love empowerment through leadership and running. So great to be on.
Well, you're definitely in the right place then. We're going to obviously talk about all of that today, which is very cool. But I want to start with your background and your upbringing, because it was somewhat unconventional, I guess. You moved around a lot given your father's career. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm a female Pakistani engineer that likes to run marathons in her spare time. So probably not quite what my traditionally minded Muslim parents had in mind for me. So with my dad being a diplomat, we traveled between different countries and cultures. And at the age of 15, they made a huge sacrifice to leave me here in Australia, where they were posted to ensure that I could receive the best education that they could provide. You know, looking back now as a shy young 15-year-old, I was entering grade 10. You know, it was pretty tough. It was scary and it was hard. And you've got to remember, it was in an era where there was no email or FaceTime. So if something went wrong, I couldn't just pick up the phone and ask for help or call my parents and say, what do I do? So it became really important for me to build a circle of guardians, or what I call a network. And initially it was just a survival skill to just get on by. But, you know, over time it made me realize that this network has actually helped me and encouraged me and believe in me more than I believed in myself at times. And especially as a young, you know, female engineer in a male dominated world, you know, helped me sort of navigate some of those challenges. And the other thing sort of I learned through that process was a mantra that I still follow today, which is, if it's to be, it's up to me. You know, again, it's not about not asking for help, but it's about taking ownership of your choices, about backing yourself and having the courage to do things. And I think that mindset and those principles that I've followed have made me into the person that I am today. I do think I'm very resilient and I do get things done. I love, as I say, if it's to be, it's up to me, and you got to just do things.
Being left in another country at the age of 15 is pretty crazy. How do you find, or how do you think that kind of shaped your independence, your drive? You talked about resilience. Tell me a bit more about that.
You know, just being alone has taught me the importance of surrounding yourself with a really good network. And I think as leaders as well, it's about how do you surround yourself with the best people who can help you guide you along the way. You know, we don't all know the answers, and especially in the environment that we're operating in at the moment, there's just so much uncertainty and change is such a norm. It's about how do you better collaborate and work with others to come up with the best possible solution with the right support, the right mentorship, the right environment, you can thrive and grow.
Mm. And you talk about your probably your career and your running journey, which we'll get into. Probably not being what your traditional Muslim parents expected. How did they kind of see your transformation from that 15-year-old girl to later in your life?
My dad's 94, getting on now, and he's incredibly proud of me. So's my mum and I've got two sisters and a brother in my own family. So I think they're, again, not what they expected. And being brought up as a Muslim, sports wasn't on my agenda much. Spent more time probably in the books than I did on the sporting grounds, just because there weren't that many opportunities for females, let alone, being a Muslim background, to go out and play footy or, go swimming and things like that. So, no, they're incredibly proud of me. I think they do say, you're the only athlete in the family now. So, it's quite nice. And, I think one of the sort of the nice things is that I've got now a set of nephews and nieces, and, it's nice to be able to role model to them that they can go out and do these things, and we'll come to it. But marathon running is one of those things that not many people do. And it's one of the hardest things you can do. And for them to see their auntie or their sister or their mother doing it, it's nice. I don't think I'm inspirational, but it's nice to think that I've inspired them to get a bit more active in their life as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think any little bit of inspiration like that is really useful. So what inspired you to get into running? If it wasn't part of your background, if sport wasn't your upbringing, how did you make that leap?
Yeah, so interesting. So I was quite young when I got promoted into a leadership or an executive role in my company. Back then I was working in Canberra, and I was sort of one of the first female leaders on the executive, someone with colour and someone who was younger than the rest of my colleagues. And the first job I had back then was to hand out medals as part of a sponsorship of our annual Women and Girls Fun Run. And at that time, the Chief Minister of Canberra was a female, and I'd heard that she was going to fire the starting gun, and then she was going to run afterwards, and then, come on stage with me. And I thought, gosh, I can't be left behind. I better run as well. So that's when my running journey started, from couch to 5Ks, literally couch to 5Ks. And initially it was just about keeping fit and staying active. But, the 5Ks slowly turned into 10Ks, that slowly turned into a half marathon, and then eventually into my marathon running. I do find the benefits of the running really helped with my leadership career. I think it's made me a lot more resilient and stronger as a person. And I actually call it my moving meditation, because it was that 1 hour. So being a morning runner, I run around 5:30 to 6 a.m. And it was that 1 hour where I could leave the mobile phone in the car or at home and just totally disconnect and have that me time. So away from the kids, away from work, away from everyone, and just plan out my day, think about what was ahead of me, solve my world problems that we all do in those long miles, and actually come up with some of my best ideas as well. So I love it.
I can definitely relate to that as well. I use running a lot as a thinking time. I think it's really useful, regardless of trying to think about new things or solving problems or whatnot. I can definitely resonate with that. I want to know. So I think it's an awesome story how you got into running, wanting to be that kind of role model to others who were doing it at the time. When did it shift for you from being something that was kind of good for you to be doing and good for your fitness into something a bit deeper and starting to get a bit more competitive about it?
The turning point for me was I was at a work function, and, they have the guest speakers come in up on stage, and the guest speaker at this event was Robert de Castella, who many of you will know is an Olympic marathoner, competed for Australia very successfully. And he was up on stage, and he has started a foundation called the Indigenous Marathon Foundation. He had just come back from the Boston Marathon. It was in 2013, and that's the year that they had the Boston Marathon bombing. So he was sharing the story about how he had taken a young graduate girl from Kakadu up to Boston, how she had trained to run the marathon. Sadly, she had to stop at 40 Ks, but very safe. So that was the happy ending out of that. And it just inspired me to go, oh my God, if these people can run a marathon after 6 months of training, and it's totally transformed their lives. And he was showcasing the changes that they've made to their communities and within themselves. I thought maybe this is something I can do as well. So at the end of the evening, I got to meet him and I said, hey, Rob, totally inspired about what you do and the work that you do. And one day I'd love to run a marathon as well, because I just completed my first half. And that was that. Next minute, I was in 2014, signed up to run the New York Marathon with the 12 the squad. And I was signed up as a corporate ambassador. And at that time, I thought, gosh, I'm probably only ever going to run one marathon. This is really tough. So I made this commitment to raise $1,000 for every kilometer represented in the marathon. So $42,000 was my goal limit. It also coincided with my 40th birthday. So it was something that I wanted to sort of give back and pay forward as well. So ended up running the New York Marathon, raising $55,000. And, at the finish line, that again was that turning point where I was like, this is just amazing. This is so great. And as a leader, I've now got a platform where I can amplify the cause and the voices of the work that Rob does through his Indigenous Marathon Foundation. And so it just became a deeper purpose for me. So it wasn't more about the marathons, but it was how can I use my running to amplify the work that Robert de Castella does.
And you've been involved with them for over 10 years now, and we'll get into all the other marathons in a minute, because I think there'll be some interesting stories there. But over that time, tell me a bit about your relationship with Rob, because I think listeners will be quite interested to understand the mind of an Australian running legend. Just share some insights around that for me.
Can I just say Rob is one of the most kindest, genuine people I've met. And there's a reason that he's the Australian of the Year, or was awarded the Australian of the Year, because the work that he has done, not just for running and marathon running, but for Australia, has just been enormous, his contributions. His whole objective with the Indigenous Marathon Foundation was initially to try and find, like in Africa, we've got the Africans, like the Kenyans, who run really fast. And his idea was, surely up in Indigenous Australia, I can sort of find some Indigenous Australians who can run really, really fast with the genetics and the upbringing. That's how the idea started. But once he got to these communities, he realized that there was just this amazing, great culture that existed, and another Australia within Australia that people weren't celebrating. There was a lot of hardship there as well in terms of the lifespan of young Indigenous people. He's much, much shorter because of the quality of the life he had. And so he set up the foundation to use running to help promote Indigenous achievements and celebration. And through the program, what he does is picks 6 females, 6 males, through their commitment, hard work, education, and the support that Rob provides, turns them into change agents then that go back to the community. And we talk very much about the ripple effect, to become change agents to help change those communities and make them a lot healthier and better.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. What's, over your 10 years there, what's been the most rewarding part of supporting that foundation and being involved in that work for you?
Yeah, I think firsthand, I've been able to witness changes that people have made, both physically and mentally. But really, the proudest thing that I am is probably the unintended stuff that happens in communities where, again, as I said earlier, when we create role models and young children see what's possible and what's achievable, their mindset changes. So we've seen attendance at school increase because people are living a much more healthier life. Communities having a greater sense of purpose, people wanting to change and be more motivated. And I think overall, you've got these young Indigenous leaders who are really committed to the cause.
I think a lot of the reason for starting the podcast is really just to understand how running impacts people's lives. And we're definitely going to dive into how it impacts yours as we unpack this conversation. But how have you seen it impact the lives of those going through the foundation? Because, having that structure and the broader support around, I'm sure, is amazing. Have you seen the kind of tangible benefits of what running really has done for them as well?
So one of the greatest things that the foundation's really proud of is running the New York Marathon is just one part of it. The other part is that we have run and walk groups in communities. So I think we've got over 50 running and walk groups now that are set up all across Australia, where people come in and do their park run or do their training. So, just creating that movement and that safe space for people to get together and run has been awesome. We've done some studies on returns of health, and we've seen people's health improve. Children are attending school a lot more. So we're actually sort of just seeing that as a nation, we're getting stronger and better as a result of giving people the same opportunities that we all have as well.
It's very powerful, and I think you touched on the important aspect around it is the community piece, right? We always talk about running from a physical health and mental health, but that community piece is so important. I think you talked about getting them along to park runs as well, like just awesome little things that we probably underestimate the importance that it can have building that community around something.
Yeah, and it's just touching people at the grassroots, and as an example, a couple of years ago, I accompanied as with Rob and ASICS, who are one of our major sponsors. We went up to a small community called Arakoon, which is at the tip of the Cape York, and we take barges off shoes that ASICS donates. We go in, we go to the schools, we fit these young kids with these shoes. They're so excited to get brand new runners in fluoro bright colors. And then we put on a color run and we make them just run laps around the oval. And, Arakoon's a very, very tough community for many reasons, but to see those smiles on those kids' faces and the sense of achievement and the endorphins and the happiness that they get, it's just fantastic. That's probably something that I love doing, is just going out to community with Rob and Waynard is one of the graduates who's from Arakoon, and, we celebrated him as well and showcased, the great work that he has done through the foundation. So, there's a role model for the children to look up to. And I remember at that time, the mayor of Arakoon was telling all the kids, I want you all to be like Waynard, be more like Waynard. And it was quite funny. But, again, just so rewarding to see that ripple effect about how, you take one person, train them, educate them, support them, put them back in the community, and that ripple effect that just is just so much more than that person. Impacting that whole community is just incredible. And it is, and it's sustainable as well, right? So it's not something that you just go one person and that's it. It's how do you create that ripple effect?
Oh, for sure. And all of this obviously got you to running a marathon. There was enough of a ripple effect that it got you to do a pretty big achievement in New York. So tell me about that. Tell me about your first marathon in New York, 2014. What was that experience like?
Gosh, I would definitely say it was definitely outside my comfort zone. And one of my favorite sayings that I always tell people now is nothing great ever happens in your comfort zone. So while it was outside my comfort zone, it was an absolutely amazing experience. Look, the training was really hard. I remember being injured at that time. I'm a bit wiser now, didn't quite understand fueling or gels or shoes, none of that. So it absolutely was a journey where I had to overcome a lot of obstacles and injuries. I remember being injured and being on a physio table and getting some treatment. And I was like, I'm doing the New York Marathon. And in my life, I've always been able to get and do everything that I've wanted to, because, my mantra, if it's to be, it's up to me. And most things I've been able to achieve. And the physio turned around and said to me, gee, you've had a really privileged life. And, and again, that was a real reflection for me to sort of say, hey, it is a privileged life to have been able to do all these things that I've always wanted to do. And so, that really drove my purpose around giving back and being part more of the community as well. But look, it was, getting to New York, there's a reason why that's one of the most favorite and happiest marathons in the world. It's a great course, go through the 5 boroughs of New York. It was very cold and windy. The night before, I remember crying in Rob's shoulder going, I'm not sure I can do this. Why have I signed up to this? Don't know what I'm doing. But as I said, the streets are filled with so many people who are just cheering you along. I think after 30 Ks, I actually don't remember anything. I remember sort of just being, I don't know, is it called the runner's high or something? I'm not sure. But yeah, finishing, I would like to run it again because I actually don't remember too much of it. I think I've blocked it out.
Yeah, it's either a runner's high or a lack of fuel to the brain probably by that point. Do you remember crossing the finish line at least?
I do remember crossing the finish line, and I do remember Rob waiting there as he was waiting for the other grads as well and wrapping me up with the Australian flag. And just that sense of achievement was just incredible that I actually did something that I didn't think was possible or I ever had dreamt that, I would ever do in my lifetime. So absolute sense of achievement. But yeah, my time wasn't great, but definitely it was about all the lessons that I learnt along the way, which is learning to be uncomfortable, learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, pushing outside my comfort zone, running through that wall, that resilience, not being a quitter. You've got to finish it. You can't stop at the 30K mark and go, I've had enough. So it was amazing. And I think once you've run a marathon, you do think that anything's achievable and possible in your life.
Did you have that thought straight away after New York? You went, hey, this is definitely what I want to be doing and let's get ready for the next one? Or did it take a bit of reflection to get to that state?
I think when I finished the marathon and then I spent the time with the squad and saw all the other squad finish as well and their achievements, I had this new sort of reflection where it became much more not just about a fulfilling journey for myself, but as I said, a way to amplify the work. Everyone who runs a marathon has overcome a lot of obstacle or hurdles to get there. Everyone has a story of why they're running that marathon. And for me, I was like, you know what, I've got a really good platform to help Rob and his foundation and the grads grow this into something bigger. So this was the year 2 of the foundation back then. And so at that time, I made a commitment to myself that I ran my first marathon at 40 and I wanted to complete the world's 6 major marathons by the time I turned 50, which is the age that I am now. And so that was a big goal for me. As I said, I was never a runner. And so I thought I'm going to use the other marathons to take other people from the squad and support and mentor them through to the finish line and through their journeys as well.
Beautiful. So we ticked off New York at 40. What was next?
The next one was Tokyo in 2017. That one I just did on my own. I kind of thought I don't need that whole fundraising community behind me. I just needed one that I just wanted to do for myself. Again, a very tough one. I injured myself. I went to 3 physios. All 3 said, I don't think you're going to be running the Tokyo Marathon. You should withdraw. Of course, I didn't listen to them. Did all my training on a spin bike and the elliptical cross trainer. Ended up being at Tokyo and actually ran a faster time than I did in New York. Conditions were great. The Japanese are amazing in terms of crowds, very, very clean as well, and everything just works like clockwork. So a really, really nice race to run. Then Boston in 2019, and again, that one I went as a corporate ambassador and I fundraised to take Emma, who had unfinished business from when she had run in 2013. So absolutely amazing to see her finish that race. After Boston, I did London, and that's when Charlie Ma, again, he was our number 1 grad who ran the very first marathon, completed his 6-star medal. So to be at the finish line with him and witness his finish was just an incredible opportunity as well, and great to be there at the finish line with him. Then followed by Berlin, and Chicago was my very, very final one last year in October.
Awesome. And there's definitely a lot that I want to dive in about Chicago, because a great marathon for you and lots to learn there. I want to take it back to 3 years between doing New York and going to Tokyo, going through what I think many runners deal with, being injured and trying to figure out what the best approach is. What did you learn in that period around how your body reacted to running, how the cross training was useful, what things made life easier, what things made life harder? Tell me about all the learnings that kind of went through in that period.
I think that running the first marathon, you just don't know what you're doing. Like, you're totally clueless. I remember being on the plane, because when you travel over, half the plane are marathon runners as well. And, everyone's sort of saying, take this gel, don't take this gel. If you take too many gels, it might create problems as well along the course. So I think you learn, what your body's capable of. So I think I learned a lot about my body and myself. I am 20 kilos lighter today than I am when I first sort of started running my marathons. So I think that improvement in physical health has been really important for me, because I think one of the leadership lessons or advice that I got very early on in my career was, if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage others. And, in those 3 years, because as you know, I had just gotten into my leadership role, those 3 years sort of really got me to reflect, what does that mean? How do you manage yourself? And I think as leaders in leadership roles, you've got to be really resilient. So to be resilient, you need to manage yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally as well. So physically, having that transformation and just feeling a lot fitter and better about myself was a big tick. Mentally, the running and the miles on the road, sort of, as I said, it was my moving meditation. It was my time out. It was my time without social media, without the phone. So it gave me that real peace to really think and declutter my mind and plan. And then I think that thing around emotional support, as you know, running with friends, I always say running with friends is cheaper than paying for therapy, because when you are running together for 2 hours, you talk about all sorts of stuff. And, I've got a wonderful running group and running community in Brisbane now, but I also did in Canberra as well. I think just those fundamental hygiene factors around, being physically fit, being mentally fit, and being emotionally fit is just so important in both business, life, and running as well.
Yeah, it definitely builds that resilience, as you say, because I think when you're working towards something like a marathon, which in itself is a big achievement and a big effort, the training that comes in behind it is super important as well. And that's where that resilience for race day and for leadership kind of gets built. When you were transitioning into a leadership role and starting to do a little bit more running as well, that often gets quite difficult to actually fit into your life. So can you talk to me about the kind of routines and the structure that you started to put in place to ensure that, obviously it was important from a meditation point of view for you, but more tactically, how did you ensure that you got your run in and still had time to do everything else in your life, deal with your family, your kids? There would have been a lot going on.
It is a big juggle. I've got 2 kids. While they're 16 and 19 now, they were, much younger. Sort of 10 years ago, they would have been 5 and 8 when probably I started running. So it is a real juggle and a real balance. But for me, because of the benefits that I saw, and that I was a better person as a result of it, as a mum and as a leader as well. One of the things I sort of diarized was, it was a bit of a non-negotiable for me. Unless it was really, really important, I'd always say, I'm not doing any breakfast meeting. And even now, if there's any breakfast functions or breakfast meeting, unless it's an absolute must, I sort of told everyone that morning, it's not because, I'm coming to work at 9 or 9:30 because I've slept in. It's because I need that time for myself. So it became a bit of my sacred time to make sure that that was always blocked out in my diary, and I prioritized it. And I think you've got to prioritize that time, because if you don't, there is just so much in life that's trying to steal your attention, right? And steal your time, and you need to block out that time for yourself. So that's really one of the things I did. And in my job now, I travel a lot around regional Queensland, and, I can always pack my runner. It always amazes me on my carry-on that I can pack 3 sets of running gear and, 3 sets of work outfits, and I can get it all in the carry-on. But, you do get it down packed, but it is a non-negotiable for me. And I think you've just got to prioritize. I think that's probably the key for me. If I don't go for a run, people go, and I'm cranky. They go, "Have you been for a run today, Ayesha?" They can tell when I haven't, because I'm such a grumpy old lady as a result of it.
Well, that probably means that all your colleagues want you to be going running as well, which is good. That prioritization is really so important, and I think people overlook that being the key element. We say, "Oh, we want to run more, we want to do all this, we want to do all that." If you're not prioritizing fitting that in, it's never going to happen, regardless of how much you want to do it. Have you found that you have been highly motivated to be doing this the whole time? Or has there been a big element of discipline at play to ensure that you are prioritizing your time and you are getting that in your life?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One of the things for me is that, as you do running and people around you and you're in leadership positions, people look up to you. So again, one of the unintended consequences was that I've got people in my workplace who look up to me and go, "Hey, if Aisha's, in an executive role and she's really busy and she's a mum and she's got 2 kids and she's got all this juggle and travel, if she can do it, I can as well." So to be honest, that's actually really motivates me, because I feel like, people are looking up to me and I need to sort of role model those right behaviors for them. But absolutely, I think we all have bad days, but can still also face bad days with a positive attitude. So it is hard to keep motivated. Very hard when you've got niggles and injuries, because you kind of want to go for a run and you want to keep motivated, but you don't want to aggravate your injury anymore. So, but yeah, motivation isn't something I lack when it comes to running, because the benefits for me as a person is just so profound that it literally is like a drug. It's what keeps me going.
It's a pretty strong motivator then, that one. Okay, so Chicago. Tell me about Chicago, your most recent race, and a pretty big one for you. Tell me about the lead-in and then obviously the race itself.
I mentioned I ran the London Marathon and then I went to Berlin afterwards. I didn't have a great race at Berlin. Berlin is meant to be one of the flattest, fastest courses. It's part of the World Six Major Marathon. And everyone around me had run PBs. I just didn't take my training seriously that year. For whatever reason, I think it was just one of those things where I've been trying to break a sub 4-hour time, but, every marathon I did, I'd hit the wall or I'd get pretty much the same time. So I thought, you know what, bugger it in Berlin. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm going to do pretty much a tourist run. And when I came back from Berlin, I was really disappointed with myself. And at that time, Rob and I had a debrief about the run, and I said, I should have trained harder. And he said, "Ayesha, it's an absolute privilege for you to be at those start lines. So many people dream of going to Berlin or these international races. And every time you are at that start line, you should be thinking to yourself that you are going to run a PB." That's what I did as an Olympic marathoner. Every time I'm on that start line, I'm thinking, I have to run a PB. So you know what? Don't ever do that again. Pretty much along those words. Maybe he was much nicer than that, but I think that's the message I took away was don't ever do that again. So leading into Chicago, I was turning 50. My birthday was on the 6th of October and the Chicago Marathon was on the 13th. I was going to get my World Six Major Marathon medal as well. And I thought, now or never, I've got to crack this sub 4-hour limit. I was really, really determined. I started training in January and built up that foundation. I was like, I know a lot about running, but there's other things that I don't really know that much about, which was the first one being nutrition. And I actually went and spoke to a nutritionist. And the first thing she said was, Ayesha, are you running to get smaller, which was, kind of what I was doing as I lost my weight, or are you running for performance? And I said, look, I really want to crack a sub 4. And she goes, right, you're running for performance and you are underfueling yourself, because many women, we've cut out carbs in our diets, especially as 50-year-old women. We get told carbs are bad for you. Don't eat carbs. And she's like, you know what? You're underfueling. I need you to start eating more and eating more carbs, because if you don't fuel yourself for performance, you're going to get injured. And, we talked about race nutrition as well. She's like, how many gels do you take during a marathon? And I was like, I don't try to take too many because I don't want to put those extra calories in my body. And she's like, no, it's like this. If you don't take all the gels at a regular interval, once you fall behind, it's really hard to catch up. So, she goes, I don't care if you don't take that gel at the 35K mark, but I want you to take each and every one of those at every 7K up to the 25K mark, because once you fall behind, there's no coming back from it. And it all makes sense, right? It all makes sense. And I was like, oh my God, these are just basic principles. And then the second thing was around strength and mobility. So I introduced a regime. I joined up the gym, started doing Pilates. I got myself a PT to just, work on my glutes and my quads to just, that's where you get your power from. Someone sort of says to me, how did you run that sub 4? And I go, gosh, there was just so many factors that came into play, not to mention my favorite part, which is, I did invest in a pair of carbon shoes as well. Love buying a new pair of shoes. And going, I need to justify this because I need to run a sub 4. So I got myself a beautiful pair of Endorphin Pros as well.
Nice. I think we all love new shoe day, and we definitely love new carbon race shoe day. That's for sure. What was the most surprising thing that you learned, that shift, I guess, to running for performance and all the other elements around it? What kind of stood out the most? Because I think, as you say, the nutrition stuff, it makes sense. Like, people tell you that and you go, yeah, of course I need to eat food. But some things around running are a little bit counterintuitive. Were there any that you came across?
So the big one for me was mindset. Last year was also a really transformative year in terms of my professional life, where we were undergoing a huge enterprise transformation program at work. And as part of that change management, we were getting some coaching through the people who were sort of implementing the software. And there was a guy, David Priestley, he actually coaches the Arsenal Football Club. And he was talking to me about mindset, and he said, Ayesha, tell me, what do you think is the Guinness Book World Record for the continuous number of push-ups that someone can do? And, there was a few of us in the room. So, why don't you have a guess? What do you think it is, Jason?
Oh, God. Most continuous push-ups. Like 1,000 maybe?
Yeah. So that's right. So everyone went around and gave what they thought was an amazing number. So, I think I might have said 500. Someone said 1,000. Someone said, 800, whatever. So he actually came and said, that the number is 10,507. And the moral of the story is that we all create these limits in our head of what is actually possible. For example, if you did 1,000, you would go, oh, I'm a legend. I've just done 1,000 continuous push-ups. Amazing. And the story sort of was about, you don't do 10,507 push-ups on day one. Through the proper training, through the proper coaching, through the proper preparation, you work your way up with that right mindset, and without sort of setting barriers in your head and limiting yourself to what's possible. Anything is possible. So for me, I was like, maybe I was limiting myself when I ran those marathons that, my average marathon speed back then was 4.5 hours. That 4.5 hours was as good as it's going to get. And that's what I did in Berlin, right? I was like, you know what, I've tried so hard, and whatever I do, I just keep getting it to 4.5 hours. So that's as good as it's going to get for me because of genetics. We all make excuses in life. We all make excuses. It's genetics. I'm too this, I'm too that. I wasn't built as a runner. So I think that mindset piece was the biggest change for me. Was don't set a limit in your mind. Just be open to the possibilities and trust the process, trust the training, and things can happen.
So we take that mindset, we add it with, adding a little bit more structured training in, which I think you were doing. We work on our nutrition, we deal with our strength and mobility. How did that culminate? Tell me about the race in Chicago.
Oh my God. So turn up on Chicago and, I had a really good lead in. So, as I said, I had my 50th birthday. I went to Dallas to spend that with my family who I hadn't seen for 2 years. So it was a really nice place to sort of lead into the marathon, where I got a lot of love and attention and messages for my 50th birthday. Turned up at Chicago. Conditions were perfect. Did the carb loading. I realized from my nutritionist that carb loading doesn't mean eating a big bowl of pasta the night before. It's a bit more scientific than that. So, I diligently for the 48 hours ate lots of carbs, and then turned up on race day, got my nutrition, got to the start line, had my carbon shoes on, started the run, and I was in control of every one of those Ks. I had the mile markers up my arm, the kilometers on my hand, because Chicago's got a lot of skyscrapers. So everyone was like, the GPS is really crap here. Because I was like, I'm not leaving anything to chance here. I'm going to have because I wasn't sure whether it was going to be in miles and kilometers. I was like, I'm really going to get this sub 4. And, and as I crossed the 5K mark, I was like, oh, I'm ahead of target. I crossed the 10 ahead of target. I was checking every 5K, got to the 30K mark. I was like, do you reckon I should, quicken up? And I was like, no, I'm still ahead. And I thought, you know what, I've got nothing to gain here. You are so far ahead of your target that just, don't injure yourself, just finish, because you know that the legs are eventually going to give in sometime. And I finished the race in 3 hours and 41 minutes was my official time. So it was a 50-minute PB, which is unheard of. I was crying. The emotions were all out. So much so that when I crossed the finish line, I had the lady was like trying to move you along in the chute so you don't get the congestion. And then next minute, these 2 people in blue outfits were coming towards me, and they're like, "Are you okay? We're going to take you to the medical tent." Because clearly I was crying, and they're like, "There's something wrong with this woman." I'm like, no, I'm all fine. It's just tears of happiness. It's tears of joy. I'm all good. I'll just stop crying now. So yeah, no, it was incredible, and never ever did I imagine, nor did the people around me. They said at best you might do a 3 hours 50, but they never imagined a 3 hour 41 minute time for me. So really pleased with that.
You should be. That's an amazing improvement. Has it spurred you on for another one? What's next?
Yeah, so I was tossing up, now that Sydney's the 7th star, I was tossing up whether it's Sydney and do the 7th star and stay on that journey, or do I stay on my theme of international marathons? So I actually am going to Valencia on the 7th of December. Valencia is meant to be another very flat and fast course. And I figure while I've got the fitness in me, I might as well see if I can improve my time. I don't know whether it was a fluke in Chicago. I don't know. It's, sometimes I do doubt myself and go, was it just fluky that I ran that well? Or do you think I can repeat the same thing that I did last year to try and, I'm going to try for a 3:30. So it'll be a 11-minute improvement, which is quite a bit once you get to the pointy end. And of course, a runner like myself, that would be a huge improvement. But let's see how that goes. I'm starting early now. I'm locked in. I'm dialed into everything.
Amazing. And you'll still have Rob in the back of your head, right? Being, you better be aiming for a PB when you're there. So regardless if it was fluky or not, you've kind of set the bar now.
Yeah. But it is such good advice though. Coming out of Chicago, my mantra was pumped, privileged and prepared. And, and I think that whole thing about being pumped and going in with that right mindset, being privileged to be at that start line and prepared in terms of, in life, there's no shortcuts. You do the training, you get the results. You do the work, you get the results. So I think that mantra is probably something I'll carry into Valencia as well.
So, one thing I really like about your story, I think, is the underlying, I guess, trend of being a role model. It's kind of what started it in the first place, going from handing out medals to being like, God, I gotta get out there and be doing it, and it's kind of continued with your work with the foundation, and you've touched on it with things at work. That sense of kind of role modeling and the behaviors that you learn through running, and the resilience and whatnot. How have you seen that morph into you as a leader? Because a lot of that started at a similar time. You came into that in a leadership role, and that's kind of why you were doing it, and that's evolved over the time. So how has running changed your approach to leadership?
I think running is really grounding. It teaches you to be humble and not take anything for granted. Because as you know, you've had your sort of setbacks and your injuries as well. I think what running has taught me is never to take anything for granted, but also to be courageous and bold and back yourselves. Because as I said, nothing ever great happens in the comfort zone. So I think between that balance, it's really just sort of taught me that, my role as a leader is to create that environment for my team and for my people to succeed. And how can I channel that so everyone can be the best versions of themselves and everyone can be bold and courageous? Because the environment that we're all working in, as I mentioned earlier, is, there's huge transformation and transition happening. So in the energy industry where I work, I often say that as we transition from a coal-based industry to a renewable energies future, we're going to see more transition in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 100. We've got solar and batteries and EVs turning the traditional models, upside down. We've got digital technology and AI disrupting the customer experience. And, those that are going to be successful in that journey are those, that can think differently, work differently, and collaborate differently. So I think for me, that running has just taught me, and especially marathon running, which is the hard stuff, that, you've got to just lean into it. It's about celebrating the small victories, not just the finish lines. And same in business, you've got to celebrate that small victories. And like in running, you take a step forward. Some steps are heavy, some steps are light, but each step moves us forward to that right destination. So, yeah, I think that's probably what I've taken away from running, but always being humble, because you just don't know what's around that corner that can sort of, knock you out.
I think that's very cool. And I think it's a great analogy because running can be pretty humbling, right? There's not much else going on other than you and hitting the pavement. And if it doesn't go well, you know about it, and that knocks you down a bit. So I think it's a good lesson to learn, and I can see how that would be very, very applicable. All right. I have a question for you that has been left from my previous guest. So I'm doing this thing where each guest leaves a question for the next. And the question is, how does running make you a better person?
Gosh, that's a good question. As I said earlier in the podcast, running has become a way to amplify the work that Rob does through the Indigenous Marathon Foundation. As I've gotten older, I've realized that our life is not going to get measured in the dollars we make or the titles we hold. It's the difference that we make in people's lives. And I feel like giving back has become a core principle of mine now, because it's about what's the difference I can make in people's lives. And I think the work that I'm doing through my running, I feel like I'm making a difference in other people's lives, either by inspiring them to get fitter, more active, enabling or facilitating change in remote and Indigenous communities, or just being that support person for my girlfriend as we go for runs and help her solve her problems. So I think that's, for me, what running's all about.
Awesome. Yeah, giving back. If we could all do that a bit more, that we'd all be better off, which is awesome. So your turn to give back right now. What question would you like to leave for the next guest?
Oh, I hadn't given this any thought, Jason. You didn't give me a heads up on this. I would probably ask them if someone was interested in sort of starting their own running journey, what advice would they give them for someone starting out their running journey?
Perfect. Oh, that's a brilliant question, and I think very, very useful. And the next person will have that thrown at them, just like you. All right, we're on to the final little piece of the podcast today, and what I want from you is 3 pieces of advice. So I want 1 piece of advice around life, 1 piece of advice around leadership, and 1 piece of advice around running.
The advice around leadership is probably the advice that I received myself, which is, if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage others. And just that importance of prioritizing that emotional, physical, and mental well-being into your life as a leader, because there's so many things around us that's trying to steal our time or our energy. So, as leaders, it's equally important to prioritize yourself and your well-being. And there's a reason why when you go on an airplane, they say, put your oxygen mask on before you put the child's on, because, if you're not physically fit yourself, you can't help others. So that's probably the one around leadership. Around running, don't be afraid, back yourself. We are a lot stronger than we think that we are. So I think a lot of us hold back because we think we can't do this, or this can't happen, or I'm not genetically disposed to this, or it's going to hurt. So I think for running, just remember, we are all much, much stronger than we think we are, and we can all, as a human race, push a lot harder physically than we are. So, next time you're out on that start line, as Rob said to me, every start line is an opportunity for a PB. So think that for yourself. And gosh, the life one is the hardest. Probably end with my favorite quote, which is, nothing ever great happens in the comfort zone. Whether it's in life, work, or play, keep pushing, keep getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's when the magic happens.
Awesome. They are some great insights, and hopefully our listeners enjoy them. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. It's been awesome to kind of hear about your journey and learn from, very interesting upbringing and having to build the resilience as a 15-year-old starting off, and driving through your marathon career and your involvement with the Indigenous Running Foundation. It's very, very cool. So thank you very much for coming on. If people like I want to follow your journey into Valencia and other things you're doing, what's the best place to keep up with what you're doing?
Oh God, I'm not very good on posting anywhere on anything. Probably Strava, I would say, is the best place. I will try and do a few posts on LinkedIn or something somewhere. You'll hear about it, trust me.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you very much again. It's really been great, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to seeing how you go in Valencia later in the year.
No worries. Thank you, Jason.
That is another episode of Execs Who Run done and dusted. If you enjoyed the show today, please do give us a follow on whatever podcast platform you listen on social media. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you want to find us. Share this episode with someone who you think might find it interesting. And as always, please get in touch if you've got any feedback. I would really, really love to hear from you. Otherwise, I will see you again here very soon. Enjoy and have a good run.